Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us, or good day, depending on what part of the nation you're from. It's an exciting day today, as always, when we get an opportunity, when we have an opportunity to come together. But when we have an opportunity to come together and do good work, it's even a better day. And we're excited to be here. We're also excited to have some very, very special guests with us today on the webinar. And I will introduce you in just a moment. But first, I just wanted to quickly introduce myself. My name is Doug Sharp. I'm the host of the National Leadership Briefing. Today's webinar is called The Unintended Consequences, How the Government of Canada's Funding of Marie Stopes Impacts Women in Africa. And today we want to highlight during the webinar this organization and the funding that is going from the Canadian government to that organization. And by you coming to this webinar today, I just wanted to let you know that from my perspective, I see you as someone who is keenly interested in learning more and wants to find out ways that you could help. Now, why is it that I just take a moment here? Why is it that the National Leadership Briefing and myself, why would we host a webinar like this? Well, for those of you who are familiar with the National Leadership Briefing, we come together, we teach the coming together of people of faith in Canada and rallying around the things that we believe in, those four pillars. One, that parents have the right to raise their children the way they want. Second, that those we elect to serve us in civil government must respect and defend our right of belief and freedom of religion. Number three, that the laws and policies, including our fiscal policy, which we're talking about today, must provide for the safety and security of the citizens, especially the vulnerable. And of course, number four is that it is inappropriate for governments to heap debt upon the backs of our children and future generations. Well, we believe these things for ourselves here in Canada. We also believe those things for the families and children internationally. And so we have today, it's very exciting. We have today someone who's going to bring us an international perspective on where our dollars are going internationally. So I want to introduce you here now to our special guest today, who's going to be speaking to us about this issue. Obianuju Ikiocha is a founder and president of Culture of Life Africa. She has an initiative that's dedicated to the promotion and defense of the sanctity of life, marriage, motherhood, and families. Uju is also a biomedical scientist in hematology and works in a hospital in the United Kingdom. We're going to be sharing with you also her websites and some information about a documentary that she has done today. We're also going to be, welcome Uju. I should say welcome to you, Uju. Uju, thank you so much for joining us. We're looking forward to hearing from you, and I would just love to turn the microphone over to you now, and please feel free to address the Canadian leadership. We have leaders from all across the nation here joining us today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much. It is quite a privilege to be able to connect with everyone like this. Obviously, the pandemic has made it impossible for us to travel. I used to come to Canada at least once a year for the last couple of years, especially with the kind of foreign policy that Canada now has. So that has made it imperative for me to come out to Canada to speak, to do various events, to try to meet members of parliament when it is possible. So I'm very pleased that we are still somehow able to maneuver with the situation we have in the world now. So Marie Stopes International has been very much an organization that I've been monitoring for almost 10 years now. As Doug had said in the introduction, I am a scientist by profession, but you can say that by passion. I am a pro-life advocate, an activist, and how I started doing this was in 2012 when it came to my attention that it is important that African countries, we should see what is happening with African countries with regards to pro-life issues, but not just as a standalone, but in the context of their relationships, these African countries with Western countries, particularly their Western donors. So it was really in trying to, find my bearing with this work that this organization, Marie Stopes, came to my attention. So just for the benefit of everybody who is in this webinar today, I just need to present to you the organization that is Marie Stopes, because I know that there is a chance that many of you may not have heard of Marie Stopes, and some of you who may have heard of Marie Stopes may not really understand exactly what is Marie Stopes and why is it such an important organization. It was founded in 1921. It is a British organization, so obviously I live in the United Kingdom, so it has made it kind of easy for me to be able to start from their home office to actually see what they are doing or learn about them. They still have their headquarters here in the United Kingdom. They have their initial office in London, and from there they get to do all the work they do around the world. Marie Stopes, from the point of view of someone living in the UK like myself, Marie Stopes provides about a third, and some years it will be a quarter of all the abortions done in the UK every year. So Marie Stopes performs about 70,000 abortions each year. So they stand with an organization like BPAS, they stand with the NHS, which is our general healthcare provider here, and they are performing abortions. And so you would think they are just an ordinary abortion organization in the UK. In that case, we would not be here today talking about Marie Stopes in a Canadian gathering. This is why Marie Stopes is actually important to you. It is not because they are providing a third of the British or the UK statistics, the end of year statistics of abortions, but because in the last couple of decades, in more recent decades, so in the last 20 or 30 years, Marie Stopes has now taken up an identity as this international healthcare provider, but it's not just healthcare, it is sexual and reproductive health care. So they have made themselves into this organization that has more even an international interest than a local interest. So in as much as they are providing abortions here in the UK, they have made it in such a way that they almost are perceived as this, yes, British organization, but British organization with a very strong outreach, international outreach. So they are existing in about 37 countries around the world, and that doesn't seem like all that many, considering that there are almost 200 countries in the world, 190 something, but they exist in 37 countries, and it is not just it's not just arbitrary, it is actually quite strategic. Of all the 37 countries that Marie Stopes has established a presence in, 16 of those countries are actually African countries. And if you look in the end of year report, they claim that Africa is about 50% of their users, that's 48% of their users. So we make up as the continent about half of every product or service that this organization claims to be providing. So that really means that Africa as users are actually more important a client than any other person or any other part of the world for this particular organization. And so the African market, if I can put it that way, is really very important and critical to them. So now it is because, or in that position where they are very much an African providing organization, so they are a British organization that is catering half of the time to an African market. Now that means on the international stage, they can actually then stand and lay claim to foreign aid, because obviously the one thing that is and has been quite consistent for African countries is that African countries are great recipients of the so-called foreign aid, ODA, the Official Development Assistance Fund. So we stand to, in this position where we are constantly every year receiving funding from various countries around the Western world, but also from, other multilateral organizations and other, big corporations and philanthropic organizations like the Gates Foundation. So Marie Stopes has been very clever putting themselves in a position where they are seen as, you can see, like an international food providing organization, for example. At the United Nations, they are very, very strategic in the work they do. They often appear at when you're talking about UN type organizations or agencies, the UN agencies would want to partner with them because they're standing all the time out as this organization that has a huge focus on Africa. So because of this position, because of this position that Marie Stopes has taken over the years, this is actually what has made it possible for them to get money not only from the United Kingdom, because normally an organization, any organization will be most likely to get money if they're going to ask for funding. Well, you go to your country. You don't have some, German organization coming to the Canadian government to take money. You do not have some, Danish organization coming to America to take. Normally, an organization will go to its home country to get money from the government. But Marie Stopes has been quite smart because at this point in time, as of now, Marie Stopes is actually getting money from maybe about 8 or 9 Western countries. So they do get a lot of money from the United Kingdom every year. They get money from Denmark. They get money from Norway. They get money from Australia. They get money from Sweden. They were getting money from the United States of America up until 2017. And I don't know if we have time, but maybe we can talk a bit about that in the question section. But up until 2017, Marie Stopes was getting money every year from the United States of America. They get money from the Netherlands, and of course they do get money from you, the Canadian taxpayers, even though it is a British organization. So I always like to remind people that, you are a taxpayer in your country, you better watch out because perhaps you are sponsoring some CEO whose office is in London, or perhaps you are sponsoring some organization whose headquarters is in New York, but you're somewhere else and you are paying your taxes to your government, and your government is giving away the money not to organizations from your country, but this particular organization that is actually British in origin and British in every other way. By the way, all their top executives are actually either based in London, or they are British, or they're all linked to London somehow. So there it is. So this organization has been getting money from the Canadian government, but then it has been very remarkable that in the last 3 or 4 years, Marie Stopes has had even a more clear and a more prominent position as a partner in the Canadian International Project. Whatever it is that is your foreign policy, your projects abroad, if you go to your government website, you'll see Marie Stopes right there. They are one of the listed partners officially on the government website. So that is just that. But mind you, I mentioned that Marie Stopes is here in the United Kingdom. They are known as an abortion provider. I mean, they do give some sort of family planning, they do contraception and things like that. But what they are mainly known for, and what they are, when anybody is going to Marie Stopes, is most likely going to be for abortions. Even here in the UK, when we are praying during the 40 Days for Life, the pro-life people, we normally would go to a Marie Stopes clinic because those are the places where it's very obvious that this is the business, the main business of the day that is carried out in those facilities. So what is it that this abortion organization is doing in Africa? Why then are they able to get money from all these countries that I listed, these wealthy Western countries, in the name of the work they are doing in Africa and other parts of the developing world? When in reality, African countries, most of the African countries actually do not have legal abortion. So of the 55 African countries, now they're 55, no longer 54 because of South Sudan, the African countries, about 4 of them have what you will call abortion on demand, which you have maybe in other, in Western countries, and that's South Africa, Mozambique, Tanzania, Tunisia, and Cape Verde. These are the African countries that have gone through the process and they've legalized abortion. That means that about 80% of the African countries have all kinds of restrictions, some of them really serious restrictions against abortion. So you can say that almost 80% of the African continent does not have abortions. And the reason why we do not have abortions in all those countries is it's not because we don't know how to legalize abortion, or we're still trying to feel around our way and see, oh, we don't know, how can we get legal abortion? The reason why most of these African countries don't have legal abortion is that there's absolutely no support for it within their various populations. Every time a poll is done, every time a survey is done, it is always shown and demonstrated quite well that actually the people don't want abortions. Anywhere that abortions have been passed, more recent years, that was Mozambique, and that was back in 2014. It was done in hiding, it was done in secret. It is never something that you can put up for referendum because nobody would support. In some of the countries, there's like 80% of the people and above would always say that they don't want abortion to be legalized. So African nations have really taken this very strong stance against abortion. So how come is it that Marie Stopes is then having 48% of their services located in and around Africa? What is going on? This is what I have found, and this is where my own expertise and the work that I have done on Marie Stopes, this is where it actually comes in. In the last couple of years, I have traveled through various African countries and through various African regions. I have spoken to people, I have seen Marie Stopes facilities, I've tried to track how they have been setting up their work. I have tried to question people to know what they think about Marie Stopes within their communities. And this is where I find them as a real giant in all these African countries where they exist. Marie Stopes does a lot of lobbying. As I said earlier, the African countries, in most cases where abortion is not legal, people don't want to legalize abortion. There is no, there are no placards on the streets, campaigns, protest. There's none of that, okay? If you're going to have any protest, it will be like a pro-life demonstration. And even in most countries, people would say we don't have to do a pro-life demonstration because everybody understands that abortion is actually terrible and we don't support it. So Marie Stopes, in those countries where it's such a minority, you will not find the kind of a huge support in order to make anything happen as far as abortion is concerned. They then take all of those millions that they receive from these 8 or 9 Western countries, plus their private donors, to lobby in the most fierce way. I have seen them lobbying in a country like Sierra Leone, where nobody actually is clamoring for abortion. Marie Stopes has lobbied all the way to the presidency. They had the first lady of the country at the time, this was some years ago, now she's no longer the first lady, but they had her actually saying that perhaps she supports abortion. And we knew that what had happened was that Marie Stopes had gotten to her. This is how Marie Stopes operates. They go into an African country, they approach the parliament. Sometimes they do these so-called meetings and retreats in really beautiful 5-star hotels. They try to convince them, they get the local leaders, they get the traditional rulers. So they continue to, to push for more acceptance, even though they can never reach the general population, but they are trying constantly to lobby the leaders who they think it is easier to sway them. So in Sierra Leone, the lobbying that Marie Stopes had done and carried out within a space of a couple of months, they actually got to the stage of passing a bill in secret. This was December of 2015. So I got there in January, only a month after this bill had been passed, and found out that the people were actually really upset about it, to the point that the president of the country then stopped it. The president at the time, even though his wife was saying she supports abortion, the president refused to sign this bill into law. And that is how Sierra Leone, actually that attempt failed. So imagine that all these attempts and all these lobbying efforts happening, not only in Sierra Leone, but in different African countries. They do have the same strategies in all these countries because it's the same organization. So it doesn't matter whether they're working in Nigeria or Sierra Leone or Tanzania, they're actually working out of the same playbook. So this is what Marie Stopes does with the Canadian taxpayers' money. They use it to try to buy their way into countries so that abortion can be legalized one way or another. Now, there have also been various cases of things that I have seen in different countries where Marie Stopes has been accused, and it has been alleged that Marie Stopes has been performing illegal abortions in various African countries. And this is not only gossip. In those countries, there are actually countries where people and institutions have gone as far as taking action against Marie Stopes. It happened a couple of years back that in Zambia, Marie Stopes was completely banned for a period of a couple of years, I think it was, because about 490 illegal abortion cases was discovered by the health minister. And of course, that led to a suspension for Marie Stopes. In a country like Niger, Marie Stopes was also suspended. That was only 2 years ago. In Kenya, they also had some kind of suspension because of the fact that they were violating some censorship board laws in their advertisement, because they were saying abortion is not legal in this country, but anytime you go to Marie Stopes' Facebook or Twitter, you find that they are sort of trying to appeal to young people, and they are putting coded messages saying to people that they can actually perform abortions. So even if they don't come all the way outright, but people kept pointing to the fact that a lot of their statements were so obvious that they were talking about the fact that they would provide illegal abortions. But it's not only talk, they do provide abortions in these countries, because most times when girls come out and they are affected by it, or they are suffering, or their lives have been somehow damaged by this abortion that has been done on them, they always then come out to say who did the abortion. And in many cases, Marie Stopes is always implicated. In Nigeria as well, which is my own home country, Marie Stopes was stormed by the police. This was I think it was early last year or late 2018, and there was a huge police raid on the Marie Stopes clinic because of, again, allegations of illegal abortions being performed. There have been cases in Uganda as well where people have alleged that Marie Stopes has performed abortion, and it's not. In fact, there was in fact one case where a woman almost died and then eventually needed a hysterectomy because of an abortion that was provided to her inside Marie Stopes. So it has just been all these cases that have come up in different places. I know of a court case that went all the way to the High Court in Uganda, where a nurse was alleging that Marie Stopes was performing illegal abortions, and she would not she would not engage in it, and that was how she lost her job. So the same Marie Stopes keeps coming up and up in these African countries where they exist, where people are accusing them of all kinds of things. But it's not only illegal abortions and the accusation of illegal abortions. There have also been real issues with the contraception services that they claim to have been providing in different places. I personally, when I was making my documentary Strings Attached, we found some villages in a very rural part of Uganda where women said that Marie Stopes had come on a mobile outreach. They have these mobile clinics that come into villages. These women said Marie Stopes gave them contraception that completely destroyed their lives. I mean, it had all kinds of side effects. And because it was a mobile clinic service, Marie Stopes came, gave them these IUDs, gave them some Norplant, and then left. So all these women, imagine these women in villages, rural villages, who don't really have access to good medical services or easy access to doctors as you may have in a Western country. And they're suffering from all kinds of side effects that they were telling us. They had, constant bleeding that lasted for months. Some of them had something that seemed like a partial paralysis. Some of them were talking about things much more intimate and personal, like the fact that they had lost libido for months and months after Marie Stopes gave them these contraceptive drugs and devices. So in a way, Marie Stopes, which is this British organization, which I like to keep reminding people, has come into African villages. They are doing great outreach because of all the money that they have. They raise almost 400, I think it's something like $400 million a year. They raise that from their donors. Now they are coming into rural villages in Africa where people do not have access to basic needs. People are still wanting access to things like education, good health care. They want water, water and sanitation. They want food and all their basic needs. And this organization that is a multi-million-dollar organization essentially comes in, gives them a drug or device that completely destroys their lives and completely destabilizes them. Some of them, they destroy their marriages. Some of them, all kinds of consequences, and then will walk away. So when we were making the documentary, eventually one of the priests who went with us to this particular village had to take some of the women to hospital. He paid for them, and then they had some of the devices removed, because these are also devices that the women could not remove by themselves. If it's something like IUDs, right there in the uterus is intrauterine device. If it's no plant, it's right there in the arm, and if they do need a healthcare professional to be able to take it out. I think, from my own assessment, I think that this almost, in fact, borders on human rights abuse, for somebody from a Western country to come to an African country and be able to perpetrate these kinds of evil on people who they know cannot take a recourse to any kind of a legal, system. They cannot sue them. They cannot take any action against them. It's not like this is the West, where you will have women having class act lawsuits and all of that. We don't have any of that. We can't take recourse to our legal and judicial system in most cases against a huge organization, a pharmaceutical organization, or a sexual and reproductive health and rights organization that is essentially sponsored by Western countries. We still haven't reached the point where we can take those kinds of actions. So that's affecting our lives. There's also one very disturbing case in 2017, where a Catholic school had claimed that Marie Stopes came into their school and put some no plant into some girls' arms without informed consent. And each time any of these things happen, it's swept under the carpet, because the one thing and one area where Marie Stopes invests a lot of money is on their PR. So they have a great PR campaign that, whenever anybody goes all out to point out this is some human rights abuse, or this is something terrible that Marie Stopes has done, these are very serious allegations. The PR machine comes in and they do some real sweep and clean. And all of that is paid for by you, the Canadian taxpayer, and by me, the British taxpayer, and by the person who is in Norway and Denmark and places where people think that their money or their taxes, when it's going to foreign aid, is going to helping the hungry, feeding the hungry, paying for medical bills for the sick, giving water to those who don't have water in their communities. I think it's quite a serious thing. I think that the Canadian public, the time has come for them to ask a very serious question of their government, especially the current government, and how they have joined hands very seriously and very officially with Marie Stopes, and they're trying to do all kinds of projects. If you go to your government website, I saw that there is at least a minimum of $24 million right now, as of last night when I checked, that the Canadian government is given to Marie Stopes under, the name of 2 different projects. So I think that those monies should be queried, and this is only a minimum. I still believe that there's a lot more money, exchanging hands, because sometimes it goes through a third party, some other times it comes directly. I think that the Canadian public should be asking their government for a real accountability on this particular issue, and for transparency, because Marie Stopes is an organization that has had a lot of scandals. They have already gotten into so many problems in African countries. Is it right that a Western country should continue to fund an organization like this that has had so many strikes in so many different countries, accusing them of almost an identical thing, meaning that it is really right there in their strategy. Now, there's one more thing I'll point out before I end this little presentation, is that something happened yesterday, and it really made me laugh out, because I knew that we were having this webinar today, but yesterday, exactly 24 hours ago, I saw the news on the BBC website that Marie Stopes International has now changed their name as of yesterday. So this webinar, I was so excited, because this webinar is actually the very first event that is going to be about Marie Stopes since they changed their name yesterday. Now, why did they change their name? They changed their name because their founder, who founded this organization, as I mentioned earlier, in 1921, Marie Stopes herself, a British woman, well, Scottish woman, who was lecturing in Manchester back in her days, was actually a member of the Eugenics Society. Marie Stopes was a well-known eugenicist, and she was a well-known racist of her time. She was one who believed in completely removing the unfit and stopping the unfit from having children. I was reading one of her books just yesterday about, in fact, the title of the book is Radiant Motherhood. It is actually an incredible read, because some of the things I saw in it about what she was saying about the race, you know, having the pure race, and she believed so much in, you know, having the disabled people not being allowed to have children, that having children should be a privilege, and only a certain group of people or a certain collection of people who are deemed perfect, the right race, the right genetic makeup, should actually be allowed to have children. And I posit to say that actually that was what spurred her to do her work, to found this organization. So in other words, this organization that we are all here gathered today talking about the Canadian government linking hands with this organization, this is an organization that is rooted in racism and rooted in eugenics. It was rooted in eugenics back in the day, to the point that by today, they are now answering MSI, that's the new name, MSI Reproductive Choices. That in and of itself is one more reason why people should be asking the Canadian government to look into this organization, because the fact that they are distancing themselves from their roots, it doesn't really mean that they have changed in any way. They still continue to do a lot of their work, especially the work they are doing in Africa. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for that illuminating information. I mean, I've taken so many notes here that I'm quite surprised. This is things that I didn't know about the organization. And of course, now it's MSI Reproductive Choices you're pointing out now as well.
Yes.
After we've heard our wonderful guests, thank you, Uju, but you've heard from our guests today, our speakers, that this is something that really requires your participation. And it's not something that you have to be special or uniquely qualified to do. Just your presence here today qualifies you to be a part of the solution. So the first step, of course, is being informed on the issue. And we've taken that first step here today. The next step is to bring this issue into the public light. So what I'm going to be encouraging today is that we are going to be forming a working group on this issue. By your presence here today, you qualify to be a part of it. So if you have this on your heart and you have something resonating with you inside of you today and you want to help, we encourage you now we're going to type into the chat box now, if somebody would do that, an email address where you can actually send an email and say, I'm in. I want to be a part of a working group that looks at ways to shed light on this issue and look for solutions to this challenge that we have. We definitely want to make sure that we move forward here into the action phase. We're coming out of informed and we're going to keep you informed, but we want to take action right away. And we also want to learn more about Uju, your work and your organization. So I'm going to make sure that, again, we do send links out and we stay in touch with you, Uju, and in the future, if you would, because we really want—
And I'm on Twitter as well.
What's that, sorry?
I'm very active on Twitter, so they can find me on Twitter.
Oh, they can find you on Twitter. Okay,
like
great.
Right now, I tweet all the time.
We'll get that information out as well, because you're obviously the informed. Well, there's so many of us across the nation that are obviously interested in this issue. I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about in the days ahead. But for now, today, I just want to thank you all for being here and a part of this this meeting today. And thank you again to our speakers. And we just pray blessing over you, Uju, in the work that you're doing out there. Thank you so much for being here.